Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you're somewhere comfortable right now, because today we are really setting a very specific mood.
Yeah, it's definitely a dim the lights kind of session today.
Exactly. So grab a blanket, maybe a cup of tea, or, something a little stronger if that's your style,
Yeah.
because we are stepping away from the frenetic energy of the modern news cycle today.
Leaving the 21st century behind for a bit.
Yeah, no endless social media scrolling, no bright fluorescent lights. We are dimming the lights, and we are stepping back into what feels like both very recent and ancient history at the same time.
The 1960s.
The 1960s. Imagine, if you will, it's 1967. The summer of love is kind of winding down. The air is thick with cigarette smoke and cultural revolution.
But we aren't at a protest.
No, and we aren't at a rock concert either. We are actually in a living room in Elmira, New York. It's a Monday night, late September. Rain is tapping against the window. It's super cozy. But there's this weird electricity in the air because we are sitting in on a business meeting.
But not just any business meeting.
Far from it. I mean, most business meetings you go to involve charts, graphs, maybe a PowerPoint if you're really unlucky, and just a ton of corporate jargon.
Oh my
This
God.
one involves a trance medium, her husband taking furious notes in shorthand, a medical salesman, and a disembodied personality named Seth.
It is quite the juxtaposition. Haha.
It's wild.
You basically have the rigid corporate world colliding head-on with the metaphysical. It's essentially Mad Men meets the Twilight Zone.
That is the perfect way to describe it. So for everyone listening, let's get the specific sources on the record before we jump in. Our source material today is session 366 of the early sessions, book 8 of the Seth Material.
And the date of record for this specific session is September 25th, 1967.
Right. And just a quick housekeeping note right at the top. This podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to explore, to learn, and honestly, to maybe get a little spooked by the accuracy of what we're about to read.
Because the mission for today's deep dive is really fascinating. We're looking at a very specific high-friction intersection.
Yeah.
Because we often think of spiritual or channeled material as being about these broad, airy concepts. Love, the afterlife, the overarching nature of the soul. We kind of expect platitudes.
Sure, the generic New Age stuff.
Exactly. But this session gets deep into the weeds. We were talking about highly specific medical prescriptions involving boiling plants, and then, believe it or not, corporate stock predictions for a major pharmaceutical company.
It is the practical application of the paranormal. It's literally Seth acting as a corporate consultant.
In a way, yeah. We're going to see how this entity, speaking through Jane Roberts, navigates the personal health of a total stranger, a woman suffering from multiple sclerosis, and then, without missing a single beat, pivots to the financial future of the guest sitting in the room.
It's just so bizarre. So let's set the scene properly before we get into the actual dialogue. It's 9:45 p.m. Jane Roberts, who the entity Seth refers to as Ruburt, is there. Her husband, Robert Butts, who Seth calls Joseph, is there with his pen and paper. And then we have the witness.
John Bradley.
Right, John Bradley. In the session notes and transcripts, Seth actually refers to him as Philip. Now, tell us a bit about John, because he is not your typical 1960s seance attendee, is he?
Not at all. And that's what really grounds this whole session for me. John Bradley is a medical salesman for Searle Drug.
A pharmaceutical rep.
Yes, this is a man of science, a man of commerce. He deals in pharmaceuticals, in concrete measurable results, in sales figures, FDA regulations. He represents the establishment through and through.
Right.
He is not some hippie looking for cosmic enlightenment or a devotee trying to open his third eye. He's a guy who sells medicine for a living.
I just love that contrast. You can picture him, maybe he's in his suit and tie, sitting in this dimly lit room in upstate New York while it's raining outside. It adds this incredible layer of credibility, or at least curiosity, to the whole thing. I mean, if he is impressed by this, maybe we should be too, because it's actually pretty risky for a corporate guy to be there, isn't it?
Extremely risky. In 1967, being associated with mediumship or ghosts wasn't exactly a resume builder for a pharmaceutical rep.
Right. His bosses at Searle probably wouldn't be thrilled.
Exactly. It suggests a level of personal curiosity that overrides his professional caution. But it also fundamentally changes the nature of the session itself.
How so?
Well, if this were just Jane and Robert alone in the room, the Seth personality might just stick to philosophy or the nature of reality. But because you have a man of commerce sitting right there, the entity, Seth, decides to speak his language. We see this massive shift from the abstract to the hyper-practical.
Okay, so the session starts. Jane's eyes close. Her breathing changes. Her pace becomes rapid. She's gone, and Seth is here. And the very first thing I love about this is the banter.
Oh, the greetings.
Yeah. Usually you think of summoning a spirit as this terrifying, trembling experience where everyone is holding hands and sweating. But here, it's almost casual.
It really is. They treat Seth like a neighbor who just popped in for a late-night chat.
It's literally like, good evening, Seth. Good evening. It is so polite. It's like chatting with a multidimensional entity after dinner. Pass the salt, oh ancient one.
Yeah. It totally normalizes the phenomenon, and I think that's key to understanding the Seth material as a whole. It's not about fear, it's about information. Seth isn't there to scare them, he's there to teach them.
Okay, let's unpack the first major topic Seth tackles. And this actually calls back to a previous session, session 364. We have John Bradley in the room, but the discussion starts with a remote healing case for a completely different couple, John and Peggy Pitre.
Right. Peggy Pitre is suffering from multiple sclerosis. It's a debilitating condition, obviously, but especially in the 1960s, when treatments were even more limited than they are today. And Seth begins by addressing the work he and his associates have been doing for her.
And he makes a rather bold claim right out of the gate here. He says, and I'm quoting exactly from the text, "We have on 2 evenings visited the home in question, and we have personally done our best in directing the healing energy of the universe to this woman."
Visited the home.
Yeah. Now, physically, Jane Roberts has not left Elmira, New York. She hasn't hopped on a plane. She hasn't even left her chair in the living room.
No. This brings in the concept of non-local consciousness. Seth is claiming that while the physical vessel Jane is asleep or in a dissociated trance state, the consciousness that operates through her, Seth and these unnamed associates, can project energy across physical space to a specific target.
It's a little spooky, but also kind of comforting, the idea that help can just arrive while you're sleeping. But here is where it gets really interesting, for me, logically. Seth talks about the husband, John Pitre. He mentions that John has been driven into a corner.
Yes. This is a crucial pivot in the conversation and in metaphysical thought generally.
Right, because usually we hear that to manifest good things, to heal, you need to be totally zen. You need to be calm, detached, high vibe. If you're panicked, you're blocking the blessing. That is the standard New Age advice you hear everywhere. But Seth just completely flips that on its head.
He really does. Listen to this quote carefully. He says, "The very fact that the man has been driven into a corner has made him desperate enough so that he is able to concentrate large amounts of energy on her behalf."
Desperation as a fuel source?
Yeah.
That is heavy.
It is very heavy. We naturally tend to view desperation as a negative emotion, right? Something that creates chaos and poor decisions. But Seth is suggesting that the sheer intensity of that emotion, that back against the wall, primal feeling, acts like a laser. It focuses the intent. It completely strips away all other distractions.
It makes total sense when you think about it practically. When you are truly desperate to help someone you love, someone who is suffering, you aren't thinking about your grocery list. You aren't thinking about your taxes or what's on TV. You are 100% singularly focused on that outcome.
Exactly. It's the difference between a scattered, diffuse light bulb and a highly focused laser beam. The desperation provided the focus. Seth is essentially saying, I can work with this. He's validating that intense human emotion, even painful, terrifying emotion, can be a mechanism for positive change. It takes the shame out of feeling desperate. It turns that panic into a tool.
That is such a powerful reframing. It's like saying, okay, I'm panicking, but I can actually use this panic. I can channel this raw energy. But Seth doesn't just leave it at this abstract energy level. He gets incredibly specific with a physical remedy. And this part, honestly, this part completely baffled me when I read it.
You're talking about the alfalfa.
Yes. I was expecting something metaphysical, like visualize a white light around her or hold a quartz crystal over her chest, but no. Seth prescribes alfalfa.
Specifically, an extract from alfalfa.
And not just go to the store and buy some alfalfa supplements. He gives these detailed instructions like he's a 19th century apothecary.
He says, the tips of the plant may be boiled and drunk as a tea. And he even puts a strict timeline on it. He says this will be a benefit in approximately 3 weeks' time, but only if progress continues.
Right. He says, not yet, however. The step is not to be taken as yet. It's so wildly precise. Why wait 3 weeks? Why only the tips of the plant?
That is the mystery. And that is exactly what makes this section so compelling to researchers. The source text explicitly notes that neither Jane nor Robert nor even John Bradley, who was the medical expert sitting right there in the room, knew anything about alfalfa extract having these properties. It simply wasn't in their conscious memory.
Which is a massive point for the argument that Seth is a genuinely separate entity, because if Jane doesn't know it, Robert doesn't know it, and the professional pharmaceutical rep doesn't know it, where on earth is the information coming from?
Right. And alfalfa is interesting biologically because it is very rich in vitamins and minerals, specifically vitamin K and some B vitamins, which are actually crucial for nervous system health. And MS is a disease of the nervous system. But in 1967, this wasn't common knowledge for MS treatment at all. It's this fascinating blend of folk remedy and highly specific metabolic timing.
He's treating the human body as a machine that needs to be perfectly primed before you add the next component.
It implies that the body is a mechanism that Seth can view from the inside out. He sees the gears turning, so to speak, and knows exactly when to introduce the lubricant. He's acting exactly like a doctor monitoring a patient's internal levels. He's saying, her system isn't ready for this catalyst yet. Wait for the energy work to settle, then introduce the chemical agent.
It's the specificity that just gets me. It's not a generic horoscope. It's not just, she will feel better soon. It's boil the tips of this specific plan in exactly 21 days. It implies a level of biological insight that is staggering if it's true.
But of course, because this is Seth we're talking about, we can't just stay on the physical level. He immediately pivots to the psychological aspects of the illness. And this is where the spooky vibe really comes back in. He identifies a psychic block for Peggy.
The shadowy connection.
A shadowy connection, yes.
Oof. I mean, that sounds like the title of a horror movie, The Shadowy Connection.
It does. He mentions a woman, possibly an aunt. He says there seems to be a rather shadowy connection with a woman that does not seem beneficial. I am not certain of the aunt relationship, however. A woman approximately 35 with brown hair.
It's so specific again. Brown hair, 35 years old. It's like he's literally looking at a photograph of this family, and he flat out says this relationship is not beneficial.
And this naturally leads to the cure beyond the physical alfalfa tea. Seth advises that they need to involve Peggy in some sort of activity to focus her attention away from her condition. But then he drops this absolute gem of psychological advice. He says she needs frequent assurances of love, but also the assurance of freedom.
Frequent assurances of love, but also the assurance of freedom. Let's just pause on that for a second because that hits really hard.
It's a profoundly deep insight into the dynamic of caretaking. Think about it. When someone is chronically sick, especially with a debilitating condition like MS, the people around them naturally often smother them with love. They want to help, to protect, to do everything for them.
Right. Let me get that for you. Don't get up. I'll do it. Are you okay? Do you need anything? It all comes from a really good place.
It does come from love. But it can completely strip the patient of their autonomy. It can make them feel like a prisoner of their own illness and, frankly, a prisoner of their caregiver's anxiety.
So Seth is saying, yes, absolutely love her, but also let her be free. Let her be a person, not just a full-time patient.
It's the delicate balance between security and agency. If you have all the love in the world but no freedom to act or make choices, you're just a bird in a gilded cage. And for the human spirit, that cage can be deadly. Seth is identifying that for the healing energy to actually work, the patient needs to feel like they have a future where they are free, not just a future where they are constantly cared for.
That is incredibly sophisticated advice. I mean, this is 1967. We barely had modern therapy in the mainstream, let alone this level of nuance about caregiver burnout and patient autonomy.
And it's coming from a woman sitting in a trance state with her eyes closed. It really highlights that Seth isn't just doing a parlor trick. There is a deep, highly empathetic intelligence at work here.
Okay, so we've covered the remote energy healing, the alfalfa tea prescription, and the shadowy 35-year-old aunt. You would think that would be enough mind-bending material for one evening, but no. Seth is honestly just getting warmed up.
This is the transition in the transcript that always makes me smile. We go from this deep, heavy medical and psychological intuition straight to the stock market.
It is the ultimate 1960s pivot. John Bradley, our pharmaceutical witness, decides to ask about his day job.
It's a very jarring transition if you're reading it for the first time, but it's totally consistent with Seth's personality. He is highly pragmatic. John Bradley is sitting right there, so John Bradley asks a question relevant to his own daily reality. He asks, are things going as you said they would at Searle? Do you see any changes?
Wait, I just have to point this out. Did he just ask the multidimensional ghost for a quarterly earnings report?
Essentially, yes. Yeah. And again, look at the context of who is asking. He's a salesman. His entire livelihood, his mortgage, depends on this. He's sitting in front of an entity that just diagnosed a woman hundreds of miles away with laser precision. Why wouldn't he ask about his sales territory?
It's so practical. I kind of love it. It's like, Seth, great stuff on the nature of human reality and the soul, but am I going to hit my quarterly bonus?
And Seth actually delivers. He says, now, there is the impression of a new account.
A new account, which sounds a little vague at first, right?
Initially, yes.
Mm.
Seth even says, I am not certain as to what this refers to, but put it into the record.
But here's where the deep dive part really comes in for us. We have the benefit of hindsight. We can look at the historical notes that were added to the session transcript later by Ruburt.
Correct. John Bradley confirms this prediction later on. A Planned Parenthood clinic was opening in Elmira.
Planned Parenthood. And Searle Drug, his company, makes
controlled products.
Boom. That is incredible.
John Bradley noted in the margins that the clinic's business should absolutely be his, quote, if I've done my work well.
And the real kicker to all this.
Neither Jane nor Robert knew this clinic was opening in their town. It wasn't in the local papers yet. It was insider medical industry knowledge that John Bradley himself barely had a grasp on, and Seth just picked it right out of the ether.
That is a highly specific, verifiable hit. You can't just cold read that. You can't just guess, I see birth control in Elmira. It's way too specific to the man sitting in the room.
It is. And Seth continues with his corporate forecast. He predicts a rise in the overall company prestige. But listen to what he says causes this rise. He says this development hinges on one man who is at present considered relatively innocuous and unimportant.
I love that classic trope, the invisible genius in the company, the guy down in the basement laboratory with the red stapler who is actually quietly inventing the next billion-dollar product.
Seth calls it in the nature of a new scientific development. And then he gives a literal market forecast. He says, a rise of stock, a good rise for a 3-year period, a leveling off, and a drop.
Talk about actionable insider intel. If I'm John Bradley sitting in that living room, I am calling my broker the very next morning at opening bell. Buy Searle, hold for exactly 3 years, then sell.
It's fascinating that Seth perceives time in these distinct chunks like that, a 3-year rise. It shows he's looking at broad probabilities and market trends, not just isolated moments.
But then the vibe shifts yet again. It gets a little darker. Seth mentions a new product that has been held back by federal laws. And then he says something that honestly gave me a chill when I read it.
The aforementioned death.
Yeah, quote, I believe that aforementioned death will result in a change of policy, and a change in policy will help quicken the advent of the new product.
It's very cold, isn't it?
It's brutal. Someone is going to die, and hey, that's great for the supply chain.
It's what you might call the view from above. To an entity like Seth, death isn't the final weeping tragedy that we see it as. It's just a transition, a basic mechanic of the universe. He's simply reporting the mechanics of cause and effect without the emotional weight. A death occurs, a policymaker is replaced, or a key vote changes, regulations shift, and the product is finally released.
It really highlights the massive difference between human morality and whatever dimensional level Seth is operating on. He's not celebrating the death at all, but he's not mourning it either. He's just stating a fact. This is the domino that needs to fall for this other thing to happen.
It definitely adds to that chilling vibe we talked about earlier. It reminds you that despite the polite greetings, you are speaking to something entirely alien, not extraterrestrial necessarily, but alien to our human sentimentalities and emotional attachments.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of corporate intrigue, we have to talk about the mystery of the competitor, because this part plays out like a noir detective novel.
It really does. Seth says, I also had the impression of a competitor.
And he just starts throwing out these cryptic clues.
He gets fragments of information. He sees the letter D, the name David, and then, interestingly, the phrase, the Star of Israel.
Which naturally implies the competitor might be Jewish, or maybe the competing company is somehow connected to Israel.
Seth himself says, which may mean that the competitor is Jewish. He's actually trying to interpret his own received symbols in real time here.
And what does our witness, John Bradley, say to this? Does he gasp and say, yes, David from accounting?
No, actually. He's quite skeptical during this part. He mentions to Seth that there is a Dave Gleason at his company, but he quickly dismisses him as a threat. He says Dave is an excellent salesman, sure, but they are on the same team. He doesn't see him as a competitor at all. And furthermore, he knows of no Jewish competitors fitting that specific description.
So is it just a miss, a rare psychic miss for Seth?
Well, Seth openly admits the ambiguity of the signal. He says, I'm not sure here. This is a strong competitor without your company, or it is a strong physical competitor of yours within the same company.
I actually find this part so refreshing. Often when psychics or mediums get a fuzzy signal, they try to bluff their way through it to look infallible. Seth is just like, look, I'm getting a signal, but it's blurry. It's a Dave. Could be inside the house, could be outside the house.
It perfectly shows the inherent difficulty of translating these non-physical impressions. Seth isn't reading a printed newspaper from the future. He's receiving symbols, energetic feelings, and trying to force them into linear English words. The Star of Israel could be a literal metaphor for something else entirely. Maybe it's not a Jewish person. Maybe it's a corporate logo that happens to look like a six-pointed star. Maybe David is a metaphorical Goliath reference regarding a massive competing firm.
Or maybe John Bradley just didn't know the reality of his own office politics yet, just like he didn't know about the Planned Parenthood clinic opening until weeks later. Maybe Dave Gleason really was quietly gunning for his territory, and John was just too nice or too naive to see it.
That is a very real possibility in the corporate world. We often don't recognize our fiercest competitors until they've already won the promotion. Bradley naturally assumes same company means friend. But in corporate sales, internal competition can often be way more cutthroat than external competition. Seth might have been giving him a direct warning. Watch your back. Dave is coming for your region. Bradley's own personal bias might be completely blinding him to a direct hit.
So we have the solid hits, and we have the slightly fuzzy symbolic bits, and this naturally leads to a philosophical interlude that I think is absolutely crucial for understanding the entire Seth material. Seth addresses the difficulty of pinning down exact dates for any of these predictions.
Yes. He says, and my dear friend, my time is not your time, and there are many probabilities and hence often a time variance.
My time is not your time. Come on, that is the oldest excuse in the book for a psychic making a late prediction.
It does sound like a bit of a cop-out at first glance, but he immediately follows it up with the actual quantum mechanics of it. There are many probabilities, and hence often a time variance. This is literally the multiverse theory, decades before Marvel made it a household pop culture term.
Break that down for us a bit more. What is Seth actually saying about the nature of the future here?
He's saying that the future is not a single, unchangeable track. It's not a movie reel that's already been filmed and is just waiting to be played scene by scene. It is a vast series of probabilities, infinite branching paths based on current momentum.
So when he predicts the 3-year stock rise for Searle, he's just seeing the most likely branch.
Exactly. He's seeing the probability path that currently has the most energy behind it, the thickest branch on the tree, so to speak. But because every human involved has free will, and because global events can shift, the exact timing can slide back and forth along that branch. The event itself might have enough mass to definitely happen, but maybe not in exactly 3 years. Maybe it happens in 2.5, maybe in 4.
It totally explains why intuitives and psychics are often dead right about what happens, but totally wrong about exactly when it happens.
Right. They see the core event because it's a massive energetic object approaching in probability.
Right.
But the when is fluid. It depends entirely on the micro choices everyone makes between right now and the manifestation of that event.
It's like watching a massive storm system on a weather radar. You know it's coming, you can see the sheer size of it, you know it's going to rain heavily, but you can't say for absolute sure if the very first drop of water will hit your window at exactly 9:02 or 9:05.
That is a perfect analogy. And in this scenario, Seth is basically the multidimensional weatherman.
As the session finally starts to wind down, we get this really sweet, personal moment for Jane herself. Seth leaves a direct note for Ruburt.
He talks about her parapsychology classes that she's been running. He says the classes are in a period of transition. He will learn much from them and need to help others.
It's just a nice little cosmic pat on the back. Keep going, kid. You're doing good work down there.
It shows that Seth isn't just an impersonal cosmic encyclopedia dispensing stock tips. He is a genuine mentor. He actively cares about Jane's personal and spiritual development.
And then the session ends. He says, I bid you all now a most fond and affectionate good evening.
Very classy to the very end.
But the night isn't actually over for the humans in the room, and this is a detail from the session notes that I found utterly fascinating. After John Bradley packs up and leaves, Jane, who's now completely out of the trance state, says she feels something lingering.
A glimmering, she calls it.
She says she felt this strong intuitive sense that many of Seth's predictions for John would work out, quote, soon and all at once.
It's what researchers call the bleeding effect. The medium retains a feeling or a residue of the channeled knowledge even after the entity fully leaves. It strongly suggests that the human channel isn't just a passive, hollow pipe. The water leaves the pipe wet, so to speak. Jane is starting to develop her own conscious intuitions, or perhaps she's just consciously remembering the emotional flavor of the massive amount of information Seth just passed through her nervous system.
Soon and all at once. That is such a powerful, evocative phrase. It feels like an avalanche of reality just dropping on this guy.
Which perfectly fits with the desperation theme we started this whole discussion with. Energy builds up under intense pressure, driven into a corner, and then releases all at once into physical reality.
So looking at the big picture, what does this all mean for us? We've gone from the remote energy healing of a terrible disease to boiling alfalfa tips, to Planned Parenthood business deals, to the fundamental fluidity of time itself, all in one sitting.
I think the biggest takeaway here is the profound interconnectedness of absolutely everything. In our modern waking world, we constantly compartmentalize our lives. We have our doctor for our health, we have our stockbroker for our money, and we have our priest or guru for our spirituality. They don't mix. But in this one session, Seth completely weaves them all together into a single fabric.
The health of the physical body, the health of the bank account, the health of the eternal soul, it is all part of the exact same conversation.
Exactly. And it is all fundamentally driven by energy. The energy of a husband's desperation healing his sick wife, the energy of a new scientific development lifting a corporate stock price, the negative energy of a shadowy ant blocking a physical cure. It's a universe made entirely of interacting forces, not just dead physical objects.
And it really highlights how intensely human this session felt despite the supernatural source. They were worried about their health, their jobs, their office rivalries. It wasn't angels sitting on clouds playing harps and talking about pure light. It was gritty, it was practical, it was real life.
It really was. It beautifully grounds the highest metaphysical concepts right into the mundane mud of daily life.
Now, if you are listening to this deep dive and thinking to yourself, I need to know more, I need to read this actual transcript for myself, and you really should, because we are barely scratching the surface of what's in these books here is exactly what you do.
Go straight to the source material. This entire deep dive was based on the Seth Material, which is published by New Awareness Network.
You can find all the books, the original recordings, the archives, and absolutely everything you need at sexcenter.com/the-early-sessions. Seriously, go check it out. It is a fascinating rabbit hole, completely worth falling down.
And remember, we are just the guides pointing at the map. The real journey is reading the material yourself and seeing how it applies to your own life. Just, maybe check with your actual doctor before boiling any alfalfa tips.
Haha, good advice. Disclaimer noted and legally filed.
But the advice Seth gave on love and freedom, that is something you can use immediately in your own relationships.
Absolutely. And that leads us perfectly to our final thought for today. We talked a lot about how John Pitre's raw desperation was the exact fuel that allowed him to focus healing energy on his wife. That desperation, which is usually seen as a terrible weakness, became his superpower.
It raises a profoundly important question for all of us.
If desperation can create a focused energy strong enough to literally heal physical tissue from miles away, what other strong unconscious emotions are we accidentally using to shape our reality right now? When you are sitting in gridlock traffic, just seething with anger, what exactly are you manifesting into your tomorrow? When you are terrified of losing your job and constantly dwelling on it, are you accidentally focusing a laser beam of energy on that exact negative outcome?
Are we constantly fueling our problems or are we fueling our solutions?
Something for you to mull over as you turn up the lights and step back into your own chosen probability.
Indeed.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll see you in the next probability.
Goodbye.